Welcome to Launchpad, the unique radio show and podcast that celebrates new book releases and the authors that created them. Now, let's take off with your host, Grace Sammon.
This is Launchpad. Welcome to episode 43 with DJ Green, Ross Hightower, Deb Heim, Ginny Rorby, and Peggy Joque Williams. I'm so excited on behalf of Mary Helen Sheriff, the author marketing coach, and myself to welcome these She Writes Press and Black Rose Writing authors to the Launchpad studio. Today we're going to delight in a witch who has to master her own powers, a girl who has to prove that an entire greenhouse of plants has been witness to a murder, a young girl who is ill-equipped to deal with Louis the XIV's court, and a family story that explores how we define progress and speaks to the impact of man's impact on geology and vice versa. Join me here on episode 43 and these great authors. I want to welcome each and every one of you. DJ Green, tell us about your novel, No More Empty Spaces.
Thank you, Grace. It's so good to be here. No More Empty Spaces is the story of a man, his family, and a mountain valley. And Will Ross is a divorced American geologist who has decided to take his 3 children with him when he goes to work on the construction of a dam with a very troubled foundation in a remote and rugged part of Turkey. And once the family gets to Turkey, Will finds himself struggling for control of that family. Those kids aren't quite as happy to be there as he thought they would be. His work, the landscape the dam is to be built on, and he finds himself ultimately struggling with himself.
Sounds like there are a lot of rocky foundations there. I look forward to hearing more about No More Empty Spaces by DJ Green. But first, let's hear from Deb and Ross, who have written several books together. They're quite the partners in crime. Share with us about your work.
Okay, the book I'm talking about today is Spirit Light, Volume 1. It's the 4th book in an epic saga that will probably be 12 to 14 books. And it's about a peaceful people who are throwing off their imperial oppressors. There's a main series, which is about 6 books that I'm writing by myself. And then there will be a whole slew of prequels that we don't know how many yet, but those we're writing together. Mm-hmm. And the main story centers on 2 sisters, Minna and Aylin Hunter, who have spirit sight. And spirit sight causes pain in people around them. So one of the sisters, Aylin, is arrested by the Inquisition, and Minna has to go rescue her. And while she's doing this, she learns to communicate with the spirits. She makes allies, and she's able to rescue her sister. But the Empire now know who they are. So in Spirit Light, their mother was the greatest seer who ever lived. And she she saw a way for them to win their freedom, but she didn't tell anybody. So in Spirit Light Volume 1, the Empire is coming for them. They have to withstand that initial assault while Minna and Aylin try to figure out what their mother wanted.
So we've got already family connections between DJ and Ross and Deb. I love stories with family in them. Ginny, tell us about your Girl Under Glass.
The Girl Under Glass was inspired by The Secret Life of Plants that I read in 1974. And I came up with the idea for it and have been noodling it ever since. And it is the story of a young girl who is a juvenile delinquent, in trouble all the time, bad, unfortunate home life. And she gets assigned community service with a botanist doing experiments in plant communication. And back in 1974, when that Secret Life of Plants was written, of course, that was all woo-woo science. But now, of course, it's been all sorts of things have been proven about how plants are able to communicate through smell and all sorts of mannerisms. And this is the story of the young girl coming of age story, but realizing that when her the guy she's working for, the botanist she's working for, is attacked, that the plants are witnesses to this attack on him, but she's got to get the police to believe her. And so it's been a fun story to write. And but I literally the science had to catch up all of these years with what I had read so many years ago. So
Well, and like you said, it was woo-woo science before
yeah,
and not so much woo-woo now. I'm sure
not at all.
DJ will be talking to us more about some science that appears in her book in a bit.
Yeah.
Last but not least, Peggy Joque Williams, Courting the Sun.
Courting the Sun is historical fiction. It takes place in 17th century France in the court of Louis the XIV. And it's about a teenage girl who grows up in the small town of Amiens, France, and unaware of her mother's background. But on her 16th birthday, she gets an invitation to attend court. And when she gets to court, she gets assigned to be the maid of honor to Louis's main mistress. And everything at court is wonderful. It's one big party. It's just great fun until it isn't anymore. And then she has some hard lessons to learn.
One of the things that I thank you. One of the things that I was struck by in each of your works is your attention to world building. Each of us, even if we are watching or writing contemporary fiction, we have to build a world, create a scene, have the place be as real as our characters. But in each of your books, I think world building had to take a very special focus. DJ, could we start with you and how you created your world?
Sure. So most of the book happens in that remote, rugged mountain valley in Turkey. And I have been fortunate enough to do a lot of traveling in Turkey. And the book is actually loosely based on a period in my late husband's life when he was the chief foundation geologist for a dam with a very problematic foundation. So I'm also a geologist, and so part of the reason I began writing was to translate the wonder that I feel for the earth and the geologic processes that shape it for non-scientist readers. And so making the landscape come alive and be as much a character in the book as the people who are walking on it felt very important to me, and was probably one of the biggest lessons I had to learn as a creative writer, was how to do that so it felt natural and organic. But I think building that world was very important to No More Empty Spaces.
And I thought it was interesting in the materials in prepping for today. You very much wrote about how the earth changes us and we change the earth. And I went to things like, okay, when we build roads, we blow them up. But can you give us some examples of how we change the earth and the earth changes us?
Sure. So, for instance, when we do make a highway, happens all along the Pacific coast here. If a geologist who understands landforms doesn't look at, say, the road alignment, it's quite possible that during construction, the way we say it in geology is you could cut off the toe of a landslide. So if you have a slope and the top is called the head and the bottom is called the toe, kind of like us. That's kind of intuitive. But if you cut off the toe of a landslide that isn't moving, say it has moved in the past, there's this lobe that sticks out, that's the toe, you can actually help that landslide reactivate, because you've taken the system out of a stable position and you've removed the thing that sort of holds it in place. And so when we cut off the toes of landslides and big rainstorms happen in steep terrain, that's often why there are landslides and rock falls and things that close roads. Sometimes it's just an inconvenience, and sometimes it's catastrophic, depending upon when these things happen and where.
Indeed. Let's go to Ginny then for a minute in terms of world building and the plants, keeping with our science theme for a minute.
Well, of course, mine takes place mostly either in a jail cell, a court, or the greenhouse. And I have an undergraduate degree in biology, but my best friend here in Fort Bragg is a botanist, so I relied heavily on her knowledge of plants. And I just loved creating the whole scene with the plants and the reactions. And there are many experiments that the botanist does in there that are repeatable. And so his goal is, of course, trying to get Kelsey interested in something besides getting into trouble. And so little by little, she changes, of course, and becomes very fond of him, but not before she gets in a lot more trouble and a pretty horrific car accident too. So
Okay, keeping with young people, maybe getting in trouble or getting out of them. Let's go to Ross and Deb, who certainly have two sisters who need to do some important work in such a complex world you are building over multiple books.
Yeah.
Talk about
One
world
of,
building.
one of the things about this book that I think makes it different than a lot of fantasy is it deals with a whole range of things beyond. I mean, there's the magic and the magical world, no magical creatures, but we talk about art and economics, and there are fight scenes that are pulled from everywhere. Yeah.
Yes, I use a lot of historical references to in a fantasy you can create the world whatever you want, but I wanted it to be recognizable. So there's a lot of history behind how imperial powers go in and destroy a culture,
Right.
And how those oppressed people try to recover that culture.
Right.
For example, in Hawaii, there are groups of people trying to recover their language. And so we use those kind of references in building the world. So there's, in fantasy, you have that freedom to create whatever.
Right.
But readers will recognize a lot of it. They'll
Right.
see the same things that are happening in our world that are happening in this world.
Well, I think the best fantasy is if it doesn't feel real, if you can't identify with it,
Right.
you fall off the page. We have to have those nuggets that ground us in the
Mm-hmm.
story. So I'm
Right.
glad that you share that. You mentioned some historical pieces, and no place better for Peggy Joque Williams to pop in than with her beautifully complex story, Courting the Sun.
Yeah,
So talk about that world building there.
Yeah. So I did have to build a world that was unfamiliar to me because it took place so long ago. And I think like Deb and Ross's book, it still has to be anchored in what people know today. And the story takes place 400 years ago in France at a time when Louis was, he was the Sun King. He was the person who decided everything. He did great things for France. He built their economy. He built up the arts. He loved to dance. He employed painters and artists. But he also did, and he built that beautiful Versailles, but he did that at the expense of the people. Once he built Versailles, all the nobility had to come and live there, and they had to behave the way he wanted them to behave, and they had to dress the way he wanted them to dress. Everybody had to be Catholic. So while he did great things for France, he was also a bit of a despot. And I learned so much about what France was like back then and what the world was like and what Europe was like. He brought light to Paris. Like all the other cities in Europe, there were no lights after dark, and so it was very violent. He ordered that all the streets would have big candle sconces every so many feet, and at the intersections and in front of businesses. And it lit up France, it lit up Paris at night. And now they still call it the City of Light. So I had to do a ton of research. I think the thing that was exciting for me to do that research is that's where my ancestry is from. And I'm huge into genealogy. And so that was kind of the basis of it. And then digging deeper into it.
This is just a wonderful conversation because you have such disparate books. But I think there are so many nuggets here that we can connect in terms of our research, in terms of history. I would like to now talk about the themes of family that are in your books. And I'd like to start again with DJ. Your theme of family is obviously central, but each of you have some sense of family. So let's start with you, Ginny. It's DJ, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt like Ginny, actually. The science of geology is certainly woven through the story. I hope the landscape feels like a character. But I'm also an avid reader of fiction, and if I had set out to write a textbook, I would have written a textbook. So, so I wanted those other things to be woven into a story, and family, I think, is very compelling. We all have them. We all struggle with them at times. We all love them, and we all, well, we hope so anyway. But we all have times where it's really difficult to be in relationship with our families. And I hope the Ross family embodies some of that, and so that it feels universal. And they also end up with a non-traditional family, and I think that family is how we define it, and chosen family is just as important, sometimes more important than the families we're born into. And I hope that I illustrate some of that chosen family, how we choose who lifts us up and loves us along the way.
Oh, I love that. Ross and Deb, you have alluded to sisters and a mother who didn't share what she could have shared. So talk to us about the importance of family in your books.
Well, I can't tell you certain things about the family.
Spoiler.
Yeah, there are a lot of big spoilers that have to do with family. But, that was one of the ways of drawing a really sharp contrast between the Alaos, which are the oppressed people in the empires, and the Alaos. They're very family-oriented, community-oriented. And in the empire, they basically sell their daughters off, for political gain or whatever. So that's a very stark contrast between those groups. And the importance of family is one of the most important differences between those two cultures.
Yeah, and as a result, the Alaos, when they start to fight back as Ostera, that is found family as well. And as the empire comes in and starts slaughtering people, there's all these dispossessed people. And one of the things the Alaos and Ostera did was plan for this, in part because Reagan was a seer, and started like ahead of time planning, okay, we're going to need refugee camps.
Take care of people.
And
right.
And they even take care of people they don't like. And that's like, that really messed with some of the empire, the Volan Empire, messed with their mind. Like, you have an advantage over me. Why aren't you treating me like I've treated you? And they're collectivist, and they say, well, this doesn't serve me. I just want to protect myself, and we want you to leave us alone. So that whole sense of community, bigger than family, is a driving force in the whole world.
Ginny, now to you about family and the curmudgeon-y botanist. How does family play out in your book?
Well, for one thing, I've always found solace in nature, and my character's mother is a raging alcoholic, and so she has always felt cut off from anybody that really loves her for the right reason, because she's the one sort of taking care of her mother and not the other way around. So what she finds with Dr. Hobby and his cat is and the plants in the greenhouse, she begins to feel the connection to both of them and to the plants and to nature. And to me, that's always been, as I said, my solace. And it shows up in all of my books. That's the connection for all of them, is the sort of dysfunctional family, and finding it by the family that you choose, which is friends and sometimes pets, and just, being um, at peace with yourself in the world and what you have.
Okay, let's go to Peggy because Peggy's has a decided family secret. And you've already alluded, Peggy, to that all of Versailles had to be a family of some sort. So talk
Yes.
more about family, please.
So family is represented in different ways in my story. My main character, Sylvienne, she and her mother live in probably what's a non-traditional setting. Her mother is very young. Um, they live in the gardener's cottage of a larger manor house that's on the grounds. And they live with a cook and a gardener that, even though they're servants, Sylvienne calls them the French version of auntie. And so they're like family to her. And her mother has resisted remarrying. So that was very atypical. Sylvienne does not know much about her mother's background. Her papa died when she was like a toddler, 4 or 5 years old, in an accident, and she doesn't know much about his background, and her mother won't talk about it. When she gets to Versailles, the family of the king is a whole different thing. King Louis was married to a woman that his mother chose. He had many mistresses, he had affairs. He had a brother who is just a favorite character of mine, Philippe. Philippe was married twice, had children, but he was gay. He was a cross-dresser. He married primarily because he needed to have heirs. He was the Duc d'Orleans. And so the royal family itself was kind of a very different royal family as well, because it was just the two brothers. And yeah, so families have secrets. A huge theme in the book is learning about the secrets of the families.
Well, it's no secret to me that one of the things Launchpad has taught me is that I no longer navigate to one genre. I used to be, oh, I like historical fiction, I like women's fiction, and then there's a whole bunch of nonfiction that I read as well. But Launchpad has certainly opened my eyes to genre. So I'm hesitant on the one hand to talk about genre because I think we should all enjoy and explore many, many kinds. But one of the things that's interesting to me is in terms of marketing, and that's something we all care very much about, is who is our audience? So even though everybody should indeed read your book, who is your primary audience? And I'm going to start with Peggy this time.
My primary audience are adult women. It really is not a YA novel. But here's the thing that surprised me. Probably a half a dozen men have read this book, and they have loved it. I don't think they would have ever picked it up off the shelf because the cover is very woman-oriented. But they've all said to me, I want to know what happens. Are you writing another book? And so, yes, I am.
Oh, good. That is the best compliment anybody could pay. Ginny, you write YA and middle grades. Talk more about your audience.
Well, I do. All my books. This is, I think, number 8. Have all been middle grade, mostly middle grade. YA. When I first started writing, there was no middle grade. There was just the YA. And but I also got categorized as a middle grade YA writer. And I find that adults are equally enjoy the books that I've written. Certainly, that is rewarding. So the one of them, like Dust I Rise, which was the first novel with a black rose, was a coming of age novel because the character in it starts out at 10 and ends up at 24. And so I was told by my other publishers that she was too young in the beginning for YA and too old in the end for middle grade. And so we just decided coming of age worked, and it was historical fiction also during the Dust Bowl. So that my audience basically is young people, but I certainly have lots of adult readers, thankfully.
And I'm absolutely amazed by how much I enjoy reading YA. So thank you for writing
I do
to that
too.
audience. Ross and Deb, your primary audiences.
Oh, I wish we knew. I really do.
I didn't really have anything in mind when I started writing, and reviewers some of them said it's YA, some of them said it's adult. Oddly enough, the people who reach out to us the most are older women
who never have read fantasy ever.
And I think it's the emphasis on family and relationships that they connect to.
And the complexity of the world. And the other thing is we kind of write for each other. To be honest, we're our best audience. And if we don't like it, we write what we want to read.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's always the rule of thumb, right? Write the book that you want to read. DJ, your audience.
Adults, and I think of all genders. And actually, a friend of a friend just sent me a text. She just read the book and she said, it's a smart, nerdy, adventurous beach read, which I never would have thought of. But I think what it's saying is that it moves fast enough. It's not, it tackles some serious issues, but not in a dark way. And so I think it's something you can read on a plane or on vacation, but hopefully it makes you think a little bit too. So interested and I guess slightly nerdy adults.
I think you need to capture that quote and do a lot of promotion around it. I think it sounds wonderful. We are almost out of time. So I'd just like to ask each of you as I go around, what is the one thing you really want people to know about your book? DJ Green, No More Empty Spaces.
I would love for people to look at the landscape around them just a little differently when they turn the last page than when they started reading the book, because geology matters to all of us, even if we don't realize it. And I hope that they'll have a little bit different sense of this amazing place that we call home as a character in their lives when they finish reading the book.
Beautifully said. Ross Hightower and Deb Heim with Spirit Light.
This book deals a lot with prejudice. And I would like people to be able to look at other people and learn their stories rather than judging them for, what they look like or
what caste, what class, what group.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of clash of that in this. And I hope people go beyond the magic pieces of this and the fantasy to kind of see the contemporary themes.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that happens for everyone. Ginny, Rorby, Girl Under Glass.
I think it would be wonderful when someone finishes this book, if they just walked outside and looked at it, maybe hug a tree. I don't know, but look at nature a little bit differently. Open your eyes to what's going on all around you. I would appreciate that very much.
Wonderful. Peggy, Joque Williams, Courting the Sun.
I think what I'd like people to take away from my book is a sense that people are complex characters, that nobody is all good, nobody is all bad. And we have to look beyond what we see on the surface to find out what people are like.
I have enjoyed having the group of you on immensely. All of your books sound wonderful. You're really an inspiration. So thank you for sharing your time with us here on Launchpad.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grace.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
This episode is copyrighted by Grace Sammon and Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. Thank you for visiting with us on Launchpad.